Hello and welcome to In the Light Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And it is with great pleasure that I introduce my guest today, who is Sandra Wallin. Hello, Sandra.
Hello, Anna. So nice to meet you and to be here with you today.
Well, you have created this beautiful set of oracle cards, um, and it's
Thank you.
the Council of Horses Oracle. Now, first of all, tell us what is the Council of Horses? I think that's a good place to start.
It's a great question, actually. The Council of Horses is actually made up of the horses that Kim McElroy and my co-creator and I shared our lives with. So the horses are literally outside right now, peeking in the window as we're talking, as well as the horses of legend and myth and spirit as well. So the council is made up of these advisors, these teachers, these friends, the confidants, the benevolent wisdom keepers, really, that humanity has walked along beside through the course of our evolution. But I would extend that even out, perhaps even beyond time and space as we've come to know it.
So this implies that you are an animal communicator.
Well, sometimes people say, Sandra, are you a horse whisperer? And I say, well, I think maybe more a horse listener would be more accurate. I feel like the horses are the ones doing the whispering, and I just feel so blessed and lucky to be in their company and that they're choosing to share things with me, which is how the message is actually in the deck. The first part of each card is the voice of the horse. It's spoken to the reader from the horse. So getting in connection with them, what is it they wanted to share? What message did they want to bring forward? And what teaching or healing did they want the card to be about? Because horses are really quite adept at being shapeshifters, and regardless of so I practice equine assisted learning and wellness, and so when people come out to work with the horses, the same horse can show up in an infinite number of variations, depending on what that person might need that day. So if the same person comes out day after day after day, the horse will, what's the right word, embody, present, bring forward for them exactly what it is that they need in present time that day. And I love that. It's one of the most majestic, I think, parts about working with horses.
So what you're saying is that they're very intuitive and that
Oh,
will
yes.
tune into a person
Yes.
and
I
give them,
think they read us.
yeah, they
Yeah.
really, and I think that that's why they are so brilliant at therapy as well.
Absolutely.
Nevertheless, I think that for you to be hearing them means that there must be a telepathic link going on.
I would like to think so. I believe that I've always been drawn or called by horses, even when I was little, when we couldn't afford to have horses of our own. I always found my way into their company, however I could figure it out. And there was something about being in conversation with them in a language that really goes deeper than words. So for sure, speaking to the heart, the mind, the body, being able to quote unquote hear what they were saying really inside of me, I guess could be a good way to put it. And always felt very much invited into their space. I remember I was down at Return to Freedom, which is a beautiful wild horse sanctuary down in California, and I had, interestingly enough, had a riding accident, so I couldn't walk up into the mountains with everybody that day to go out into the larger herd. So I spent time with a herd that was close by the Choctaws, actually, and in the Council of Horses, there is a card that I wrote for the Choctaw horses, the horses of the Trail of Tears. And I went down and I just sat in the field. And first of all, the stallion kind of came over and circled me. He was looking at me sort of out of the corner of his eye, giving me, a fair enough wide berth, and it was almost that he gave me his approval. And then after he walked on by, all the little ones came and they laid down and went to sleep in front of me as a semicircle. And then the mares came, and I just thought it was one of the memories I think I cherished the most was that they allowed me to kind of be part of the herd. It was incredible. Incredible. And I think for some people it might, oh, there's just a lady sitting out with the horses, no big deal. But it was much more than just that.
That's beautiful. And I had an image in my mind's eye of you as a little girl, with your hand
Ah,
on a
yes.
horse. I could just picture that,
Mm-hmm.
you being there. Um, what is it within you, do you think, that meant that you didn't grow out of this, as in you didn't think, oh, it's just my imagination?
Oh, there's a card also in the deck called Wonder, and it's exactly about this. You're just what you said, Anna, the little girl reaching up to touch the imaginary horse, and then the adult reaching up to touch what turns out is actually a real horse. So the little girl knowing that the imaginary horse is real. It's giving me goosebumps, also making me a little bit teary. How so many of us lose touch. Like we grow up, we're conditioned out of making make believe. And I mean make believe in and of itself, just by that term, is like believing it and dreaming it. The Hopi talk about dreaming our world into being. So why wouldn't we dream big dreams? Why wouldn't we imagine? Imagination is more important than knowledge, Einstein tells us. So why wouldn't we love to be in touch with those parts of ourselves? So I think maybe horses imprinted on me when I was really young, and I don't think of them this. I've always thought of them as my family, and so maybe that's part of the reason why I never lost touch with it. And then when I got old enough, and my husband and I started to have a family of our own, I just knew that instead of going somewhere else to spend time with horses, it was time when we could bring horses here to live with us. And oh, it's been a dream come true, really.
Well, that is beautiful. And listening to you talking about, the world of make believe, which is, of course, imagination. I, for regular viewers of this channel, they will remember that most mediums that have been on this program talk about the importance of imagination, because it is a tool by which um, spirit can actually communicate with us. We have to have that ability to visualize something in order to receive an image.
Mm.
We have to have the ability to um, have thoughts in our minds in order to be able to receive the thoughts of another. The trick comes in trusting, and I think that
Um,
that is the bit that interests me here with you, because somehow you didn't fall into the trap of believing that whatever's in your head is not real.
hmm.
And because this is the trap that most of us fall into. Oh, it's just my imagination. And
Oh,
and that is the death knell of any opening up that we might be able to do.
I love that you said it that way. And for me, imagination. I kind of grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, and having my own horses, that just wasn't a possibility. But I always knew that I would. I always and the idea of the visualizing as you're describing it and imagining it and connecting to it through all of our senses, so that it's not just a picture, but it's a sound, it's a smell, it's a texture. all of those things, when we imagine it, when we embody our imagination in that way, that's where manifestation comes from. And so if I've always dreamed of horses, and maybe, so sometimes I wonder too if horses dreamed of me in the same way, like Rumi talks about that which you are seeking is seeking you. I would love to believe that horses also dreamed of me, and that's how we ended up finding each other.
Now that's a very interesting,
Mm,
and I'm just taking it in because it's sparking lots of different ideas, and not least of which is the idea of soul connections
mm,
and the thought that if human souls can decide to meet again on this dimension and organize themselves to do so, why would animals not do the same?
I believe they do.
I think they do because having had the pleasure of Don Brunke's voice, who's Don Brunke's presence in on this podcast twice, three times, and she is an animal communicator. But what she also did was she did a reading for me and my dog Teddy,
Oh, wonderful.
and Teddy was very clear that that we were meant to be together, and that he had, that this was a plan,
Mm.
that this was a plan, and that we had been together many times before. So I think I love that idea of the horses dreaming, you know, coming to you. I think that's beautiful. So the horses that are currently in your life, did they come to you when they were young? Were they rescued? How did you find each other? Because I think one of the sad things about horses is the number of times which they can be sold in their lifetimes, and have no say in being separated
Mm.
from their people, their fellow horses.
Yeah, it's so true, and it is so sad. And again, you're touching on these beautiful threads that have such deep resonance. And there's a card in the deck as well called the Forgotten Ones, and it's what you're just describing now, that they're allocated to the fringes, moved on down the road, etc. When Greg and I first bought this little acreage that we lived on to be able to bring horses, I had this idea because it's 5 acres, so we don't have room for a large herd. And I always dreamed of, because my father was Dutch and would take us to the Netherlands, and we'd see those big black Frisian horses running through the green fields with the white fences, and it was just captivating. It just made my heart skip a beat, how the beauty of them. So I always thought if I could have my own horses one day, that I would love to have this big black Frisian. He read us Black Beauty when I was young, so there's something about the black horses also that soaked into my cells and into my heart from when I was little. But also then I dreamed of the white horse, the majestic Andalusian type of horses. And interestingly enough, I'll come back to the question, but it's just making me think of after I had my riding accident with my gray horse Chiron, and had a near death experience when I was told to come back. When I had some readings about that afterwards, and back to what you were saying earlier too, they told me that Chiron and I had been together in many lifetimes before, distinct from each other, not knowing what each of the other readers were sharing, and that this lifetime was about learning how to integrate the wisdom of the black and the white horse. So here I was, my whole life dreaming about a black horse and a white horse, and then having a gray horse that is born black and turns white. So there's this whole interesting storyline about that. But Chiron came. I thought I had found the horse that was going to come and be my first horse. Her name was Wisdom, and she was a white mare, white Trakehner mare. And I was going to teach out where she was, and she passed away a couple of weeks before I was supposed to go, and I was a little bit shaken and confused, and I didn't. It was very, very painful, even though I hadn't met her yet. And it turns out she had a son, had a foal. And when I went to the farm to teach, there was this little black horse being led around, and he was limping. He had just had surgery because he had torn his stifle, which is the equivalent of our knee. And when I approached him, I started to cry. Now, I've been around horses my whole life, and I never walked up to a horse and started to cry. And then Susan, the owner of the facility who had invited me out, said, "Oh, this is Wisdom's son. This is her foal." And she explained that he had had an accident and needed to have his knee reconstructed. Well, the interesting thing about this was I also had my knee reconstructed after an accident when I was younger, and I was adopted, so I was kind of, lost my mother and put out. But the even deeper thing about this for me is the myth of Chiron, the centaur, who was, you're shaking your head, you know his story, how he was, conceived in rape as I was, and then to be able to, when he was born, his mother cast him off as an abomination. And then he had the wound that would not heal. His knee was wounded by an errant arrow. And so there was all these, as the storyline started to play it out, all these synchronicities, all these stories interweaving just as I'm meeting this young horse. And of course, I'm sure you know the outcome. As much as I had never raised a young horse before, when I got home, I just couldn't stop thinking about him. And so I contacted Susan and I said, "How do you know when the horse, like, when the souls have made an agreement, essentially?" And she said, "Well, it's when you just can't stop thinking about each other." And I said, "Well, I don't know what he's thinking about, but I sure can't stop thinking about him." So Chiron ended up, she actually drove him across. He was from Wisconsin. She drove him almost all the way across the country to come here. And then after Wisdom had passed away, I was in that sort of lost place about, well, what's going to happen next. And I was going down to near Seattle to support a workshop that Linda Kohanov was teaching. And when I went there, I had met these beautiful Tennessee walking horses there. And there was this one horse that I was asked to go get, and she was really sort of aloof. She wouldn't let anybody catch her. Uh, and it turns out that I guess she chose me, because after Wisdom had passed away, I contacted this woman who became my friend, and I said, "What am I going to do?" And she said, "Well, what about Grace, who's this horse I was just describing?" I kind of went, "Grace, what are you talking about?" Like, you know that I want to work with children, and I'm only going to be able to have a couple of horses. I need horses that at least like people. And she said, "Well, why don't you just come down?" And I was like, "No, I don't need to come down. It's Grace. What are you talking about?" So I begrudgingly went down, and I took my sister with me because horses or animals just kind of have their way with her. She just they just have no boundaries. So I thought, okay, I'll see how she does with this horse, but still my heart was not open to Grace. Interesting metaphor. And when I got there, Peggy said, "Oh, I knew you were coming." And I said, "No, well, yeah, we set a time. Of course you knew when I was coming." And she said, "No, Grace left the herd and she's been standing at the fence." So, and I went, "Oh, okay." So tap, tap. She goes, "Well, let's go and see her." And so we walked out into the pasture, and she came beeline right at me and put her head in my heart. Now, this is the horse that was very, very aloof. And Peggy says, "I've never seen her do that really with anybody." And she had had Grace since she was a baby. She was 12 at this point. So I kind of just felt my heart starting to crack open a little bit, you know. So the long story, there's much more to it, but I agreed. I agreed. I opened my heart to Grace, and I'm going to actually start to cry because she passed away 2 years ago. And the card in the deck that I wrote for her, Grace, was the last card that I wrote because it was we were working on the deck while Grace passed away, and Kim's mare Dharma also passed away during that time. And I just couldn't bring myself to be so present with the grief because I didn't think I could make it through. So I was kind of keeping her in my field as opposed to allowing that profundity of the loss to become present. So when I wrote that card, it was this incredible, profound deepening and feeling and healing of her loss. And so that really, I think, comes through in the card. And she came here, and I called her the equine apothecary because she would work with the little ones that were on the autistic spectrum, all the way to corporate CEOs, and how she would kind of demand of them, show me, you think you're a leader? Show me that you're a leader. Oh, actually you're not a leader. Here's the parts that are missing. And then she would hold so tenderly the mother that had just lost a child, or again the little ones that had no sense of how to be safe around horses. She just would stand like an oak tree, deeply rooted, and just wrap them up in her branches. I mean, she was the most incredible. I had, you were talking about shamanically earlier, the horses dreaming. I had a shamanic dream once where she actually gave birth to me, and I had a um, hmm, not so much learning how to be a mom in my own upbringing, so I really felt like Grace taught me a lot about how to be a mom and love in a deep, healthy way. And so our relationship, I would say, was far more than just friends. I think we also had probably shared many trips around through the lifetimes together. So she and Kyron is still here, and then also along the timeline, after Grace came, Kyron came 2 weeks later, and then the big majestic black Frisian ended up finding his way here, Xenophon. I called him, changed his name because when he got off the trailer, I just heard Xenophon, and his name was Nike. And I went, well, do you want to be called Xenophon? I was like, yes. And Xenophon was the name of pretty much the original horse whisperer back from ancient Greece. And he wrote a beautiful book called The Art of Horsemanship, where he talked about essentially that the use of force does not belong anywhere in the relationships with horses. So he was called Zen, but my husband insisted that he would call him Hank because he thought Xenophon was just too silly of a name. And then a dear horse named Tank, who I used to do a beautiful program with my friend Ainsley called The Sacred Ride. And Tank was always the horse that I would ride and spend time with. And I always said to her, if he were to retire, I would love him to come and retire with me. And we also had an incredible. Stop me when you need to, Anna, because I can
Well,
talk this forever.
I think what strikes me is the beauty of the connections and
Mm,
how these connections have been made. So I've been listening to you and marveling at the beauty of how these connections are made. And particularly with Grace, two
mm,
things occurred to me. Number one is how could anybody resist such a charm offensive? It's, you know, irresistible. And number two, I think it's very interesting that she was not connecting with anyone.
mm.
And maybe she wasn't because she was waiting for you. And imagine if she
Mm.
had been connecting with people easily, how would anybody know when you came along that she was meant to be with you?
Oh, I hadn't thought about it in that way.
I think she knew exactly what she was doing. I think she knew that somebody was coming for her that was
Mm.
meant to spend, she was meant to spend her life with. And she was just waiting. So no wonder she didn't want to connect with anyone. She wanted to make it absolutely clear who that was.
Hmm.
I think you might need a tissue.
Might need a tissue. Yeah. The thing about working with horses is we're just really comfortable with the tears falling onto our clothes and getting horse embellishments
Absolutely
on
beautiful.
who we are.
Yeah, it's the stories you're sharing are so beautiful.
Yeah.
So we know that you're an equine therapist, and we know that horses help people with emotional stuff. And you talked about Grace working with autistic children. So it's not just emotional stuff, it's neurological stuff
And physiological
and
as
physiological.
well. Yes.
Yeah.
And spiritual.
But that's my question here is what do you feel horses generally are wanting to do for the world? And then separately, what are they wanting to do for humanity? Because I think that there are two roles here. You know, we all have something to do for our planet, and we all have something to do for each other. And for each other, I include animals and people
Mm.
together. So I'm just wondering, what do you feel they're here to do for the world? And then what are they here to do for maybe for each other and for us?
I think, well, it's difficult for me to extricate them from one from the other because I believe we're all one. The illusion of separation, again, as Einstein would talk about. So for the world as well as for humanity, I think what they're in terms of maybe if I can, I'll speak to humanity first, and maybe that'll lend itself into the global perspective. For humanity, I think they're helping us remember. And the start of the guidebook talks about a shamanic journey that I had where we asked the participants during an equine guided workshop, why have horses offered themselves to humanity in the way that they have, considering all of the historical atrocities that we have inflicted upon them? Why do they consistently and so generously bring their benevolent hearts and wisdom over and again? And what I was shown was that horse consciousness and human consciousness existed in a planet far, far away, so to speak, in galaxies far, far away. And the level of ascension and actualization and consciousness was so high and such a high frequency that when they looked out into the universe and saw this beautiful little burgeoning blue planet, they made an agreement to bring that high level of consciousness here. And then what I was shown was like a dandelion. So the elders kind of blew the dandelion, and horse consciousness was placed into one seed pod and human consciousness in another, and we were meant to journey here together. But on the way between here and there and here, we got jostled about a little bit. The human consciousness. So when we alighted here on the planet, horse consciousness remembered that sacred contract, but human consciousness, it became lost to us. And so, why have horses? What is their purpose with humanity? To help us remember, to help us remember.
Beautiful stories again. And
Thank you.
it's, I think that this episode of In the Light, Growing Your Soul may be distinct from all others by the number of beautiful stories that you are sharing with us. Um,
Thank you.
so we are here to, they are helping us to remember who we are.
Who we are and what we came here to do, which was to live in this harmonious, integrative place. And we're so, we're so divided, we're so separate. Even the fact that we're thinking about humans and horses, like, well,
Yeah,
what if we were all one consciousness? And I believe that we are. So then how does that in turn impact the world at that level? I think as we remember, because even we're talking about the relationship with horses, how it would perhaps originally have started with humans and horses walking alongside each other, and then as humans quote unquote evolved, we dominion over horses. So now you would see the hoof prints and the horse prints, the hoof prints and the footprints. I'm already thinking I'm a horse as we're walking alongside each other. And then now we just see the horse prints because the humans are on the back of the horse. But now we're starting to see again an awakening, I would say a remembering about the sanctity of the relationship, not just with horses, but with all life. And so now we see again the footprints and the hoof prints walking alongside each other again. And as those are laid down, I think that what that propagates is respect, compassion, inclusivity, unity of all species, of all creatures, of all consciousnesses, the stones, the rocks, the trees, the streams, all of that together. And then on a practical note, and this is a I don't can't remember the exact name of the forest, but there was a forest in England where they took the wild horses out. They removed them, and because they thought the horses were actually damaging the land and the forest. And what they saw happen was the forest actually started to die. And so they brought the horses back in, and it restored the equilibrium of the ecosystem. So again, human nonsense getting in the way, thinking that we know what's happening. And this is happening all across. Also, the big argument in the United States is this battle over rangeland, that the horses are taking the grazing away from the cattle. And this, this get human nonsense, if we would just pay attention to what nature is teaching us. So I think horses are in a way also ambassadors for the earth, and helping to connect us, reconnect us with her teachings and her wisdom. And there's something about horses. Sometimes people say, well, what is it about horses? I really think it harkens back to that journey I was talking about, but also because we've literally, as we've evolved, horses and canines, horses and dogs have been, not zebras, right? But horses specifically. So I think that also speaks to that original contract as well. I haven't so much explored the one with dogs. I haven't had a dream like I had about the horses, but have always. I mean, our English Mastiff Gus is upstairs drooling on the porch right now, so we've always shared my life with both. So I think that the idea, I don't know, I'd never said it that way before, but that horses being these ambassadors for the planet. And then I spoke with a gentleman many years ago, because I've also wanted to be a marine mammal vet, and there's something about the whales and the dolphins that have always grabbed hold of my heart too. And he said in some shamanic traditions, indigenous traditions, they speak about horses as land dolphins. And so there's a connection in terms of
I like that.
yeah, isn't that
I,
beautiful?
I think that's very apt, actually.
Mm.
Um, and yes, I think dogs play a very important part in this, as do all animals. I feel that they're all calling us to remember who we are, one way or another. So this deck is a very beautiful deck. I'll tell you how I've been using it.
Please.
Been using it in my practice as a therapist,
Wow.
and I have been using it with certain clients at the end of the session so that it's a, that they choose a card. And as always happens with these marvelous cards, they speak words that sum up our session
Mm.
beautifully, and they take away uh, an inspiring image or message with them. So that's how I've been using them.
Oh, thank you. What a beautiful. That's so touching because as a therapist myself, you who uses cards, I mean, I have very, very many decks, and I fall in love with the idea of how really the spirit is drawing the card to create the summation or sometimes the invitation if we're using it at the start of a session as well. Because sometimes we can't always be out to work with living, breathing, snorting horses. So for me, this is like having a herd in a deck. And then if I were to approach a field of horses, the horse that would make a connection with me is very much like drawing a card. I think of it very much the same kind of process. So you're doing equine guided wellness and therapy too, Anna. You're using it with the council of horses as opposed to the horses that are outside.
I like that very much. Yes, I think that is the case. So I am reminding everyone that this is the deck that we are talking about. It is called the Council of Horses Oracle. It is so beautiful and in so many ways. It's visually beautiful, but also there's something very gorgeous about the messages that all come through. And I will just hold up an example here.
Oh, Dharma.
You can see. So I've just picked that one just now. I shall have to look it up and see what it's all about later,
Mm.
given that I've just picked it. I can't waste it. So,
That's actually Kim's mare that passed away.
oh,
Yeah.
well,
Beautiful.
beautiful stories you have shared with us today, and
Thank you.
befitting a gorgeous oracle deck. Thank you so much, Sandra, for your time today.
Oh, it was absolutely my pleasure, Anna. Thank you so very much.
If people want to find you, how do they do that?
Oh, they can come to sandrawallin.com or chironsway.com, which is the name of my business, but it's really so much more than the name of my business. It's my life's work. And of course, Chiron is my teacher in terms of being the horse as well as being the myth. So all of the links to the deck and to the programming to how to contact me if they have any questions, all of those can be found through my websites.
Wonderful. I'll be putting a link to both in the description box. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Bye for now.
And thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.